This one is chunky. And just like that, we're back to talk about another GPS watch. Shocker. Today we're going to be taking a look at the Casio G-Shock GSW-H1000-1A. I think that's the name of it. Casio really needs to work on their marketing department when they name these things because the names are just getting out of hand. Plus, this thing's so cool looking, I feel like they could have named it something like the Dominator or Excavator, I don't know. The name G-Shock has been around forever, right? They've been building these ruggedly robust watches for a long time. I don't even know when they first started. And ever since the launch of the G-Shock watch as a whole, they've been ruggedly tough and built to take a beating, but they've also been really primitive at the same time, just being able to tell the time of day, the date, and kind of basic stuff. But that's where things change with the G-Shock GSW-H1000. This is the first G-Shock watch to be ruggedly tough while also being a full smartwatch at the same time, featuring Google Wear OS. And on paper, this thing is pretty darn impressive, so I was really excited when G-Shock reached out to ask if I wanted to test this thing out and share my thoughts with you. And that's what's going to happen in this video today. And in full disclosure, Casio did provide the G-Shock GSW-H1000 for the purpose of this video to test and try out and share my opinion with you. I did not pay for this watch, so take that for what it's worth. That being said, this is not a sponsored video and Casio did not pay me to make this video, and all of the thoughts and opinions I share with you in this video are my own. With all that jib-jab out of the way, let's dive into the hardware of the Casio G-Shock GSW-H1000. At first glance, you can tell right away this is a chunky watch. Again, this is a G-Shock, and they're known to be kind of large and in charge, and that's exactly what the GSW-H1000 is. And by default, it bears a striking resemblance to the GBD-H1000 that I've got on the left side of the screen here. And this G-Shock GBD-H1000 I actually reviewed about a week ago, and I'll link that video up here if you're interested in that watch. This watch is a smartwatch, but it doesn't feature Google's Wear OS, so it's not quite as full-featured as the GSW-H1000. The GSW-H1000 is a 65mm diameter watch, and it's about 20mm thick, so yeah, it's a big watch. Not only is it big, it's pretty heavy too. This watch comes in at 103 grams, which is on the heavier side for a sports watch. And just as a quick size comparison with some other large watches that I have on hand, I've got the Casio G-Shock GSW-H1000 here all the way on the right. Next to it, we've got the G-Shock GBD-H1000. That's almost the exact same size. And then we've got the TicWatch Pro 3, which is another Wear OS watch, along with the Garmin Enduro, which is one of their larger watches. And down the end here, we have the Suunto 7, which again is another Wear OS device, which we'll talk about a little bit more near the end of this video. Now that I've raved a little bit about how big this watch is, let's take a closer look at the hardware and what it features. So of course, this watch has the classic G-Shock look with those pillowed big pieces of plastic around the perimeter of the watch, and these big pieces of plastic actually serve a purpose. These are designed to protect the case from an impact. If you were to whack it against a rock or grind it down the side of a cliff or something, that's what this is designed to take. Underneath that plastic is a steel bezel, and when you flip the watch over, you've got a really nice looking steel backplate here as well. The G-Shock GSW-H1000, being built ruggedly tough, is also waterproof down to 200 meters, which is a lot deeper than a lot of its competition. The band design on this watch is pretty similar to the GBD-H1000 that I have here. You can see that they're both kind of pre-curved to the wrist. And both of these watches feature this interesting kind of rubber wedge that goes in the corners of the watch to try to contour it a little bit better around your wrist. And that does actually work pretty well. Unfortunately, the band itself is really not stretchy at all, and this has become a problem for me. I find that I land between sizes on this band, and it's so stiff that if I go to the next hole up, it's just way too tight. And if I go down to the hole below that, that's a little bit looser. It's just way too loose. I wish this band just had a little bit more stretch to it. That would definitely help in terms of sizing. Here is the GSW-H1000 on my wrist, which is about 165mm in circumference. And you can see I'm not a big dude, so this is kind of a big watch for me, but if I wanted to, I could certainly make this work. On the left-hand side of the watch, there's actually some unique features here. These are not actually buttons. Down the bottom here is just kind of a blank spot where a button could be, but there's no button. In the middle, there's something that says sensor, and then there's a small hole. I'm assuming that's the barometric altimeter, but I could be wrong. And then on the top here, you've got the dedicated proprietary charging port. And the included charger is not something I've seen before. It actually looks like an old school RCA cable, like the audio video cables, like an old Nintendo or something. Boy, that's That's probably dating me. But it is a pretty unique charger. It actually just plugs into the top here and it's magnetically secured. And it's really secure. It doesn't just fall out easily. And while I do like the design of this charger and how it works, it does feel very secure and confident. I don't like that it is proprietary. That means if you lose this cable for whatever reason, you're kind of out of luck, because I doubt you'll be able to find this thing on Amazon or your local Best Buy or whatever. And here's a little bit of a spoiler. You're definitely going to need this cable because you do need to charge this watch quite often. And we'll talk about that more a little later on in this video. Coming back to the front of the GSW-H1000, we've got the display. And this is a really interesting selling point on this watch. So first up on the top, we've got a mineral glass, which is very similar to something like a Gorilla Glass. So it is tough, but it's definitely not scratch proof. Underneath that mineral glass, we've got a 2-layer display. On the top, and what you're seeing now, is a low power LCD display. And this turns on by default when the watch is just idly standing by. As soon as I tilt the watch down and bring my wrist back up, the watch turns on the OLED display that punches right through that low power LCD display. As you can see, the timeout on that OLED display is actually really quick. It's kind of annoyingly quick, and I'm assuming that's just to save a little bit of battery life. And you can see here, this OLED display is super bright and vibrant. It's a really attractive display, and it's quite bright. Even in direct sunlight, when I'm out running, I can see the numbers on the display pretty easily. The user interface on the GSW-H1000 is kind of interesting and quirky. You would assume that these buttons would do a lot more than they do, but in reality, most of the interactions with this watch will be touch-based. So up top here, we have a single button labeled Start, and if we click the Start button, it jumps directly into the G-Shock Move app, where you can start a running activity or any activity for that matter. We've got all kinds of activity, from running to trail running, road biking, biking, mountain biking, workouts, surfing. There's indoor activities here, trekking, hiking, mountaineering, all kinds of stuff built into the G-Shock Move app, and these are all pretty customizable, and I'll show you that a little bit later in this video. Below the activity start button, we've also got a main menu button that I can click, and this brings you right into the Google Wear OS app draw of sorts. So here you can see things like your contacts, messaging, the agenda, the calendar, Find My Phone, so you can make your phone beep and ring if you lost your phone. You've also got third-party applications that I've already downloaded to the watch, like Pandora and Spotify I've got here. I've also got Strava on board here. And that's the real benefit of having a Wear OS watch, is that you can download literally thousands of apps from the Google Play Store that can do just about anything. Below that main menu button, we've also got a dedicated app button at the bottom here. And when I click that, it brings me right into the G-Shock Move app. And from in here, you can do a bunch of stuff. So you've got your tide graph, which is pretty interesting and probably useful for people who have a boat or surfers or something like that. You've also got an altimeter, so you can dive in and check your current altitude. We've also got a barometer in here. We've got a compass built in. We can dive in to do an activity, and we can also see our activity history. From within this app, you can also change your watch face background, and you can change the theme color, which is kind of the accents throughout the entire interface. In terms of the watch face, it's actually pretty cool. So you can customize this however you want. I've got my heart rate up top, I've got the time, my steps, calories, and below here, I've also got my past 7 days of activity. And to customize the watch face is actually pretty simple. You simply tap on any field, and then you can click these little buttons to scroll through different information that you can display on the watch face. And because this is a Wear OS device, you can install third-party watch faces, and there's a bunch to choose from within the Wear OS app. The really cool thing about this watch face is actually the background. I've got it set up to be a map, and it's actually my location in the background in kind of a heat map, which is pretty interesting because that's something that the Suunto 7 actually does as well. If you look at the background on both of these watches, it's pretty darn similar. The Suunto 7 has a little map, and so does the GSW-H1000. Coincidence or not? And of course, being a Wear OS watch, you can also swipe to the right to access your Wear OS tiles. Swiping over to the left, on the other hand, brings you over to the Google Assistant. And this watch actually does have a microphone on board, so I could say something like, set an alarm for 2 p.m.
Tomorrow at 2 p.m. Set.
No, not you, Google. Swiping up from the bottom of the screen will also display any notifications from your phone that you might have. In terms of being a smartwatch, the GSW-H1000 is fully featured. This thing can accept and decline phone calls, you can take text messages and see calendar events and all kinds of stuff right on the watch itself. That being said, this does work on Apple and Android devices, but it does work better on Android devices because, well, Google makes Android, and Android integrates better with Android. So on an Android phone, you can actually reply to text messages and do stuff like that. On an Apple phone, you can only see those text messages. You can't actually respond to them. In terms of overall wellness tracking with the GSW-H1000, it's a little bit quirky. By default, the Casio G-Shock Move app that's on your smartphone will track your daily step count, your calories burned, and your active time and things like that. Alternatively though, because this is a Wear OS device, you've also got Google Fit apps pre-installed on the watch. You can see here I've got Fit Breathe for breathing exercises, Fit Goals for daily activity goals that you can set up. I've got my daily heart rate here, and the Fit Heart Rate will actually track your all-day heart rate throughout the day using the onboard optical heart rate sensor on the back of the watch. Unfortunately though, there is no built-in sleep tracking on the GSW-H1000. That's not something this watch offers. However, again, Google Wear OS device, so there is probably something out there in the Google Play ecosystem that you could download to the watch to track your sleep. In terms of battery life, it's a little bit complicated because there's a lot of scenarios to think about with this watch being a Wear OS G-Shock device. If you're just using the watch in daily life, not recording GPS activities, and just using Wear OS connected to your phone throughout the day, you're expected to get about a day to a day and a half worth of battery life, 24 to 30 hours or so. And that's why at the beginning of this video, I said to hang on to that charging cable, because you definitely need to charge this watch every day if you're using it regularly. That's probably not too surprising if you're an Apple Watch user watching this video, but if you're somebody from the G-Shock ecosystem, like this GBD H1000 here, this watch has up to 12 months of battery life, whereas this one can only get through a day. So that's a pretty stark comparison right there. But in terms of a Google Wear OS watch, that's not unacceptable. It's pretty comparable with a lot of other Wear OS devices. However, the GSW-H1000 does have a trick up its sleeve in that G-Shock Move app, and that is called timepiece mode. So if I drop into my G-Shock Move app, and you can see here I've got timepiece mode. And what timepiece mode does is basically turn off all of the Wear OS functionality and dumbs it down to just basically a G-Shock watch. In timepiece mode, you can expect up to 30 days of battery life, which is pretty impressive, and that'll still tell you your time and the day of the week and your step count for the day. Pertinent information, but none of that Google Wear OS functionality. And finally, let's talk about GPS on battery life. If you're out on a run or riding a bike or whatever, how much time can you get with the watch with GPS enabled? For me, when I tested it using the built-in G-Shock Move app and recording activities through that, I saw like 12 to 15% per hour lost in battery life, which equates out to 7 to 8 hours of total battery life. Again, not amazing. This isn't going to be the watch to reach for if you're recording an ultra marathon or something like that. And as a whole, in terms of battery life, I feel like there's a missed opportunity there. I feel like they could have had some special mode where it has the timepiece mode, but you could record a GPS activity in timepiece mode if it beefed up the battery life. But that didn't happen. That's not on this watch, just kind of a wish. Casio, if you're watching, that's probably an opportunity to upgrade this watch. Maybe consider that. In terms of recording an activity with the GSW-H1000, it's pretty straightforward. Basically, all you got to do is hit that start button we talked about before. When I hit start here, it's going to try to find a GPS signal. It won't find it here because I'm inside of a building, but if I were outside, it would actually count down from 5 to start your activity. So now that we're in our activity, the user interface is a lot like the watch face. So basically, if I want more information on the screen, I can simply tap any of these data fields, and then I can swipe left or right here to select different data to see on the home screen. So now I swapped over to have my ascent and descent at the top, my total time in the middle, and then my heart rate at the bottom. But if I wanted my distance up top, I could just simply go back, click distance, and now I've got my distance up top. One unique feature to the GSW-H1000 is that it actually has full offline mapping capabilities, which is kind of rare in the overall landscape of GPS watches right now. If we drop back into the G-Shock Move app, you can see there's an option here for map. And if I click on the map option, this isn't a topo map like you'd find on something like a Garmin device. It's actually like a Google Maps map. It's a lot like what you'd see on a cell phone. So there's no topographic contour lines or things like that. It's a straightforward map that shows roads, some trails, but there is a lot of information to be seen here. By default, this is using the connection to my phone to download these maps. However, there is an option to download a known area to the watch itself, so you don't need your phone connectivity to use the map, which is really cool. In terms of using this map for navigation, it's a little bit quirky. You can't just type in a destination. What you can do though is actually click and drag a cursor around the screen, select a destination, position, and the watch will actually create a route to that cursor point on the map. Okay, let's talk about the companion app on your smartphone that connects the G-Shock GSW-H1000 to things like Strava and where you can sync all of your data. This app is called G-Shock Move, and it's available from Android and iOS. From the dashboard of this G-Shock Move app, you've got your general summary for the latest activity you've done with your time, distance, and average pace. Below that, you've got your estimated VO2 max, and for me, this is wildly inaccurate. It's telling me that I've got a VO2 max of 39. It seems like every time I run with the GSW-H1000, this number drops. Below that, we've got total active time, and then we've got our life log. So this will tell you things like your steps, your calories, and your distance. These widgets are fully customizable. You can see here, I can go through and reorder these however I want. You can actually add and remove to these as you please. So if you just don't want to see your VO2 max because it's wildly inaccurate, I can swipe that down to the hide menu and I won't see it anymore. Jumping over to the activity tab, we've got a brief rundown of all my previous activities. Diving into any particular run gives you a ton of information about that run. So you've got distance, time, average pace, max pace, energy consumption, cadence, total ascent, total descent, max elevation, and minimum elevation. The really cool thing about the G-Shock Move app is that it actually has a form of training analysis. So if I click on the analysis tool here, you can see that's telling me I'm currently detraining, which is fantastic. And then it gives me my training status for the past week, month, or 3 months. Jumping over to the More tab in the app is also where you can input all of your user data, like your height and weight and stuff. And there's also one very important thing you can do in the More tab, and that is link with an external app known as Strava. And this is really important for one major reason. It's because the G-Shock Move app does not allow you to export a GPX file or a fit file. So your data is kind of trapped inside the G-Shock Move app. But when you link it with Strava, you can download that data from Strava. Okay, let's talk about GPS accuracy with the G-Shock GSW-H1000. Overall, I think it did a pretty good job compared to some of my other test devices. I've taken the GSW-H1000 out on several runs in various conditions, in the rain, on cloudy days, in thunderstorms, and I was also wearing my Garmin 945 LTE and also had my iPhone 12 Pro for a baseline of comparison. And for the most part, the GSW-H1000 did a pretty good job compared to those other devices. It stayed pretty close in line with them, and I'd be splitting hairs comparing them to say which one's better than the other, because when it comes to GPS, depending on what wrist you're wearing them on, which side of the body you're on, they can kind of vary a little bit. There's a little bit of drift on the GSW-H1000, but it's definitely not worth complaining about. And by the completion of most of these runs, the overall distance was comparable to the Garmin, the iPhone, and even some Polar watches that I've been testing with the GSW-H1000. So that's good to see. When it comes to heart rate accuracy using the onboard optical heart rate sensor on the back of the GSW-H1000, it's kind of a mixed bag. So to test this watch in terms of heart rate accuracy, I took it out on several runs again, wearing the Polar H9 chest strap, which is electrode based and really accurate. And I also was wearing my Garmin Forerunner 945 LTE on my left wrist and the GSW-H1000 on my right wrist. So my testing started out pretty good. The first couple of runs looked right in line with the Polar H9 chest strap and my Garmin. But for some reason, on the third or fourth run, I did like a 7-mile run, I think, and the heart rate data coming out of the GSW-H1000 was just all over the place. It started out very low, and then it ended up very high at the end of the run. I don't know what happened, but in my sample set of like 10 runs so far, like 1 or 2 were a bit wonky, so I'm not sure what's going on there. My suspicion is that the fit is the problem. Early on in this video, I mentioned that the bands on this watch are not super stretchy, and to get a good fit is really tough. So for me, when I wear a watch and go running, I wear it super tight. I don't want to be able to fit a finger underneath the watch between my wrist and the watch, but I gotta assume that on a couple of those runs when I strapped the watch on, I didn't get it tight enough, and that's what led to the bad data, but I'm not totally sure. Again, some runs were pretty good and some runs weren't that great, so take that for what it's worth. Okay, final topic for this video, and that's gonna be the price, because it's a big one, literally. $699 for the GSW-H1000. This is not a cheap watch. So at $699, that puts the GSW-H1000 in a really tough spot in terms of the competition that it's up against. $700 can buy you a lot of watch, and there's a ton of them on the market right now. So what would make you buy the GSW-H1000 over some of the competition? First thing that came to mind for me was the Suunto 7 that I have here in my left hand. This watch comes in at $399, which is nearly half the price price of the GSW-H1000. And the Suunto 7 is a full-blown Wear OS device, just like the GSW-H1000. It doesn't have the cool dual-layer display or the crazy robust build quality, but it does have a lot of functions that the GSW-H1000 does not. For instance, it's got sleep tracking and some other wellness tracking functions like body resources that's just not available on the GSW-H1000. And then if you're looking for a rugged, robust, outdoorsy type watch, again, $700 gets you a lot, like a Garmin Fenix 6. So at the end of the day, who is the GSW-H1000 for? Well, I think it's for a very specific person. I think this watch fills the need of a G-Shock enthusiast, somebody who's been wearing G-Shock watches for years, loves the look of them, loves the robust build quality, but always wanted more in terms of a smartwatch. And if you're that user, this is probably the watch for you because it is a really cool watch. It's built well, the software works well, it's got decent accuracy, and yeah, it's a G-Shock. But for everybody else, that $700 could be put towards a watch with much more features that could probably help you a little bit more in training and day-to-day life. But this is all just my opinion and me spewing it on camera to you. So take that for what it's worth. At the end of the day, it's your money and your decision. I can only share my thoughts on this device and what I think about it so far. I want to hear from you. Are you interested in the G-Shock GSW-H1000? If you are, what feature gets you going? Why do you want to pick it up? Let me know in the comments down below. I would love to hear from you. If you are planning on picking up any of the watches that I showed in this video, I will have links down in the description below, and those links do help support my channel, but they cost nothing extra to you, so it's kind of a win-win. I think that's it. That's probably it. I definitely missed something in this one. Okay, bye.